Howdy everyone, Runt9 here, and welcome to Runt9 Reviews The Last Hex. The Last Hex is a deck building roguelike game from that indie studio that attempts to add yet another unique spin on what is becoming a very crowded genre of deck building roguelikes. It does it in a few different ways, various different classes, equipment that works as gear, and a different kind of RPG stat mechanics, and multiplicative scaling, and all sorts of little interesting tidbits. But it still stays true to the core formula of build up your deck, get rid of cards you don't want, get stronger and stronger as you work your way down a procedurally generated path to the final boss, and you either win or you die somewhere along the way and start over and do it all again. How about we check out some gameplay, and then we'll come back and I'll tell you if I think that the Last Hex manages to stand out in what is becoming essentially a deluge of these types of games. I'll see you in just a few. Alrighty, let's take a look at what the Last Hex has going on for it. Jump to the options menu real quick. You can see there's not a whole lot going on here. Got resolution, full screen, music and sound effects volume. I'm actually going to turn off map scroll at start a game. Just now realized that exists. And then a few options for different gameplay elements and stuff like that. Not a lot going on there. Could see a bit more, but honestly, it's not a game that necessarily needs it. You've got a reference guide, which is actually very useful. It gives you a lot of good information about different things. You've got a run history, so you can go back and see kind of how you've done recently, as well as a compendium of cards, potions, items, and so on and so forth. There's 3 different modes. You've got the basic mode, that's just your regular roguelike run. You've got trials, which are different kind of challenges. They give you a character, a certain deck, things like that, and it unlocks some neat stuff as you go through it. And then Odyssey is meant to be more like the Slay the Spire Ascension setup, where as you keep playing, your run keeps building, and it starts increasing difficulty levels and things like that. We're going to jump into a quick run. You have 3 different difficulty levels. We're going to do Adventurer. And so these are the different classes that are in the game. At the start, you have Warrior, Wizard, and Thief unlocked, and then you have to beat runs with different classes in order to unlock more classes. As you can see, there's a lot in the game. Each class has starting Power, Arcana, and Expertise, as well as starting Gold, and all of them have Energy and HP, as well as a starting deck, a starting class skill, and some starting equipment. Usually the helmet and armor are not used for anything. They don't provide any stat benefits or anything. And then usually the gear, which is just like a trinket or accessory or something like that, has some sort of other ability. You can see right out of the gate, a lot of it feels, like what you're used to in the genre. You've got some damage, poison, defense. Expose it deals more damage on future attacks. Deflect is kind of like thorns. And so you've got a lot of that usual stuff going on. What makes it extra unique, though, is remember how you had these stats over here? Well, for example, look at the equation for this card. 4 times P plus 6, expose P plus 2. What this means is this card gets better the better your power stat gets. So for example, this damage is 4 times your power rating plus 6. Which is how you get 14, because 4 times 2 is 8, plus 6 is 14. And it exposes for E plus 2, obviously is 4 right now. So as you go through the game, as you get more power, this gets significantly better. So we're going to jump into a run. We're going to go to the world map. And so this is the randomly generated map. You have events, fights, and cities, which we're actually on a city right now. And even things like this tile and this tile are fights. It's meant to look like kind of a cohesive world. These little flags delineate level 1, level 2, level 3. They're kind of like the different floors in your typical, game in this genre. And these are hard, mini bosses that give you significantly increased rewards, as well as, significantly increased risk because they're significantly powerful. All the way at the end here, you have the Lost. This is the final boss. They start off with some contaminated hexes, and the longer you spend in the game, the more hexes they take and the stronger their final strength becomes. Your goal should you choose to accept it, is to go through this world, get all the way to the Lost, and beat the Lost. How do you do that? Well, just like this. Let's jump into a fight and take a look at what it has going on. So this is a Spiderling, level 1. It has a special ability, add 1 poison stack each time the player attacks. You can see they also have power, arcana, and expertise. It shows you how many cards in their draw pile, their discard pile, their consume pile, consume is basically exhaust, and their intent, which is going to be either attack or defend. So since they're going to attack, let's go ahead and defend. We will expose, and let's also put up defend and deflect. And so we put expose 4 on them. They take an extra 4 damage whenever they're attacked. So in this case, we're going to hit them with a cleave first, then put up some more defense. And so the key bindings just came out in an update. So you can see that pretty much everything has default key bindings for it now as well, which can obviously be very helpful for speeding things up a bit. We're going to do this, defend a little bit, add some poison, and all that. And then we'll kind of skip to the end of the battle here. I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so you can see here, you get a fairly simple reward. You get gold and then a card choice. And sometimes this card choice will be a potion choice as well. Potions do not go in your deck, they go separately, but they do cost energy to play. So for example, you can see this card is 17 plus E plus P. The top right corner is a square that shows the rarity. I've seen white, blue, purple, and yellow, and that is in increasing level of rarity. And usually the higher the rarity, the better the scaling. So we're actually going to leave without a card here. We're going to jump into an event, and we'll take a look at what this is. As you walk through the center of town, an old woman stops you. Adventurer, you bear the marks of ill fortune. Bear some coin to see what your future holds. We'll pay 300 gold. You decided that a small investment for knowledge is a wise move. The woman stares for a moment at you with rheumy eyes and begins to speak. To your horror, she begins describing your death in gruesome detail. She passes on a potion. Drink this before it comes to pass, and you may yet avoid your fate. So this allows you to run away from a fight except from the Lost destroyed after use. Okay, so it's basically a smoke bomb. And then we'll hop into a city. So this 5th slot here in each city is usually different. A lot of times it's a trainer, which is just pay some money to improve one of your base stats or max health. You want to do that a lot because, again, as you get better cards, the scaling becomes very important, and so focusing in on 1, maybe 2 stats can go a long way. In this case, we have a gambling den, which we can basically gamble 300 gold for a chance to double our money. There's always an inn that costs money to rest. You can also remove a card. Each of those you can remove a card once, rest you can do as many times as you want. There's an equipment shop with equipment that you can buy. And you can see that you have a few different slots for stuff over here. And these basically, have effects much like relics. So you've got a backpack that gives you +1 draw, reinforced 12, so you gain 12 defense every turn. Sword of the Hero, +1 to all stats. It costs a lot of money because +1 to all stats is ridiculously strong. Rations heal 20 after each fight. You've got a card shop. The left dot here shows you the rarity. The middle shows you the different abilities, or ability stats that it scales off of. And then you've got the name and the cost. And so at the bottom here, you see we have a legendary card. And this is something that I may have mentioned in the later portion of this video, that this scales exponentially. It is Arcana times Arcana, which, needless to say, gets crazy good as time goes by. And then there's a potion shop where you can buy different potions. And so basically, you're going to rinse and repeat this formula all the way to the end, getting stronger and stronger, getting your deck fine-tuned to be exactly what you want. You'll have a lot of chances to remove cards. You can even kind of pivot your deck halfway through a run because you can remove so many cards. But remember, the longer you delay, the stronger the Lost get. Can you get there and can you beat the Lost, or do you die somewhere along the way? How about you find out? But for now, we're going to jump back to my review. That's going to do it for the gameplay. All right, hopefully you enjoyed that look at the Last Hex. Obviously, run length tends to be about 1.5 hours, 2 hours. So you're not seeing very much of the building up aspect, but that should give you a good idea of what the core mechanics look like and kind of what you could expect. Now we're going to jump into my cards review system. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go ahead and check out the link in the description below where I introduce the review format that I use on this channel. And so we're going to immediately jump into the core gameplay loop of the Last Hex. And let's address the elephant in the room because it is very important. Every single deck building roguelike that comes out, and there's a lot these days, they're going to all get compared to Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire wasn't the first, but it's the best. Easily the best. And you pretty much have to come in here and use the Slay the Spire as the measuring stick unless a game is drastically different. I don't think that the Last Hex is drastically different. I do think it is very good though. That's why I'm going to give it an A- for core gameplay loop. It is not as good as Slay the Spire. But I do think that if you enjoy Slay the Spire, you will enjoy the Last Hex while still feeling like you're having a unique experience. I think they did do a good job of adding just enough new pieces of gameplay to make it feel like its own standalone thing and not just, hey guys, we took Slay the Spire, put some different artwork on it that's actually worse, made a crummy UI and just threw it out there for 20 bucks. No, this actually had some thought put into it. And I think that thought is good. My biggest knock on it is that the run length is too long. I want to be able to shorten, or at the very least make it configurable as to how long I want that hex grid to be. And it should just automatically balance itself based off the fact that the Lost gets stronger the more turns you take. And if I take fewer turns, I'm going to be less powerful, so is the Lost. So I should be able to say, I want it to be more tuned for, half as many hexes. I want to be able to have like 45-minute runs. That would be fantastic. I think run length is my biggest complaint. And also, I just don't feel as powerful with some of the neat combos as things go by. And a big part of that is the equipment system, meaning you have limited equipment slots instead of just, I'm going to stack up as many relics as I can get. It's a pro and a con. Like, I like having to make those hard decisions, but I'm also big on combos and being able to do really ridiculous things. A little bit harder to do stuff like that in the Last Hex. All that said, A- is only like a step down from Slay the Spire to me. It's not like it's a huge margin. And I really think that this is a very fun game. Moving right along to atmosphere, there's definitely a large disparity between the good things and the bad things in the Last Hex. I'm going to give the atmosphere a B- because I do think it falls a little bit closer to the lower end of the spectrum. But when it's good, it's really good. I think some of the graphical design, especially the way the Hex world is generated, is fantastic. I love seeing the Lost, I love from a graphical standpoint. I hate from a gamer standpoint seeing the plague of the Lost, those gray barren tiles where you fight undead and get no reward start seeping out from the end. It is in stark contrast to the lush green landscape that leads up to it. It's fantastic. I think a lot of the enemies are really well designed. A couple aren't, but I think the graphic design in that piece is really good. Some of the UI elements that have had some fine tuning are really well done. All of that said, there's some major flaws with the atmosphere in this game. The immersion is very easily broken by cards that I have no idea what they do because they're not very clear. Some poor translations, and granted, translation problems are going to happen with a small indie game where you're probably crowdsourcing the translations. It's going to happen, but I still have to rate it as a negative right now. In addition, I think the sound design is just weak, and the music is good. Everything else, not very good. The UI in general is fairly poor. I tend to get lost on remembering what the buttons do. The tooltips aren't always that helpful. There are some places where you aren't able to see the formulas of cards in some of the places where absolutely I need to see it. I think removing a card is one of the examples. I want to be able to see the formulas there. There are a couple other places like that. So in general, like, big negative on the UI, big positive on the graphic design, big negative on the sound, big positive on the world immersion that gets broken once I have to start playing cards. So that's where that B- comes from, is there's a lot to like, there's a lot to dislike, and there's not a lot of in between. Then moving right along to replayability, this game is highly, highly replayable. You saw at the very beginning of the run how many different characters there are, not to mention I believe the Trials and Odyssey modes. There's a lot of different ways to play the game, and there's a lot of equipment. There's a ton of cards to unlock. You could play many, 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 many runs and still not have unlocked everything in the game. I've played quite a few runs and still haven't even been able to beat the final boss yet. I haven't even gotten to the final boss yet. I've died to Undead, and I know that I want to keep trying. I want to unlock more classes. I want to unlock more cards, more equipment, all that stuff, see more enemies. There's a lot of diversity in this game. It comes with its own set of balance issues, and we'll kind of talk about that here in a minute. But I think that the game is incredibly replayable. I'm giving it an A because there's not a lot of room for growth. And I think that for me, a big part of it is just because I will get to the point where I feel like I've found what sort of deck archetypes I like the most, and then I'll play the crap out of those, and then I'll just kind of fade away. That's a lot of what I did with Slay the Spire, and obviously new content coming in will keep me coming back, but I do think that I'm going to slide into that same thing, and that happens with deck building board games. I have some on the shelf behind me that I just kind of don't like playing that much anymore. I've gotten that way with Dominion, which was one of my favorite deck building games, period, and is what started the entire deck building genre as it is many, many years ago. So for me personally, I don't think I could put just about any deck building roguelike in that A+, but this is about as close as it gets. Now, moving on to difficulty, this is where my biggest knock on the game is going to come from. I'll let you know right out of the gate. It's a C+. Man, this game is hard in what feels like some of the wrong ways. I think the difficulty curve of how things ramp up is decent, although each of the elites or champions or mini bosses or whatever they're called tend to give you very big power spikes, which granted is when you jump from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4 and so on. But I think that those power spikes are maybe a little too out there, in that you really have to guess, am I powerful enough to fight this? And sometimes it feels like you just get absolutely stomped and you don't know why. And sometimes you win incredibly easily and you're like, I shouldn't have stayed as long down here because now I'm, giving the Lost free strength. And the Lost is the biggest problem here. Those undead fights are absolutely brutal. And I mean, there was a patch that I think came out either today or yesterday as of recording this. I haven't played on it yet, that nerfed the Lost again. And that's not the first time they've been nerfed. The difficulty in this game, I don't think has been figured out yet. I think the balance of the cards has not been figured out yet. The game is still in early access, and it has a long way to go. As of right now, I'm going to give that difficulty a C+. I think that you don't start a run with the expectation of winning. You start a run with the expectation of having fun, knowing that eventually you'll die either to one of those mini bosses or to an undead hex before you get to the Lost. I mean, the most recent run I had was the closest I got, and I started that long trek from the final city to the Lost, and I don't know how you're supposed to get there when you have to keep running back to heal. It's just hard. That difficulty at a C+ reflects that, but I do think that is one of the places it's going to get much better at over time as the developer has more time to balance the game. Speaking of the developer balancing the game, let's talk about the support for the game. The support for the game so far has been quite good, albeit mostly in the form of smaller patches as opposed to large content updates. So I'm going to give the support a B. That's not to say the support is bad. It's far from it. Like I said in the last piece, when we were talking about the difficulty, a balance patch was released, today or yesterday, and it's weekly. every week there's these small little micro patches coming in that do at least a couple of things. And it added in key bindings, for example, in this most recent patch. But I feel like the content updates have been very few and far between. And at least to my current knowledge, and I could be completely wrong here, I didn't see Steam Workshop support, but I'm not necessarily factoring that in as much because the game does already have a lot of content in it from the get-go. But I don't know that the long-term health of the game is going to be as positive as Slay the Spires. But at the same time, if that is able to ramp up a little bit as the game maybe gets more attention, gets more success, that might change. So I think that things are trending in the right direction, but as it sits right now, I'm giving that support a B and hope that more can happen in the future as the game potentially gets more successful. I'm hopeful, and I think that it'll get there, especially considering that I have had some good interactions with the developer. That indie studio has come in to my Twitch chat and hung out while we're playing the game, explained some cards, things like that. Also been very active on Twitter and whatnot. And so I definitely appreciate all of that. And, that definitely plays into the support. But again, B is not bad. B is still good. I just think that there is a lot of room to improve as time goes by. So as a final recap, I had core gameplay loop at an A-, I had atmosphere at a B-, replayability at an A, difficulty at a C+, support at a B, and now we're going to talk about the tier that I put it in. And obviously, I got to go back, talk about where was Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire was transcendent. I think it's legitimately one of the greatest games ever made. It is one of the most innovative games ever made because while there were other deck building roguelikes, it took the deck building concept from board games and turned it into one of the most clean, tight, concise deck building roguelike games that has been made to this point, but also one of the best games made to this point, period. And so with that as the measuring stick, I look at it and say, how much did this improve on the formula, deviate from the formula, do its own thing, and do it well, and do it in a way that makes me want to play this that much more? I'm going to put this in my solid tier, but just barely. I think it's right on that line between special and solid for me, but I have to drop it into the solid tier because I don't feel like it did enough things differently. It does do some interesting things with the different card scaling and the statistics and the equipment, but ultimately the equipment is basically relics, and just done in a gear system. And there's also not a ton of different things that feel unique about the equipment. There's far less combo-worthy equipment than in some of Slay the Spire's relics. The card design, I think, is really well done so far. I really like the cards that exist. I think the enemy design has room to improve. There's a lot of things that I'm like, it could have been just a little bit better, just a little bit more different. I don't feel like it stands fully on its own. It's not genre defining. It's not really jumping out and saying, hey, I'm one of the best in this genre. It's jumping out and saying, hey, yes, I am not just another drop in that giant, massive deluge ocean of every day another roguelite deck building game is coming out. But I also don't think that it's one of those that you should really look at and say, this belongs in that same conversation. When you mention the genre, you say Slay the Spire and blank, comma, blank, comma, blank. I don't think it belongs in that top list. And that's why I had to drop it from special to solid when I was really thinking about how highly would I feel about this game. All that said, putting the Slay the Spire discussion to the side, if you take this game wholly as its own entity, is it fun and do I recommend it? Yes to both questions. Completely, fully, absolutely yes. I Would have to double check the price. In fact, I can probably pull that up right now while I'm talking. But I will say, regardless of the price as it is right now, I think that this is probably, in its current early access state, a good $15 to $20 game. I just checked, it is $15. I absolutely would recommend it at that price. It would need to grow quite a bit if the MSRP is going to jump when it comes out of early access. I hope it does, from, you know, a success of the studio standpoint and a success of the game standpoint. As it sits right now, I probably wouldn't pay more than the MSRP unless a lot of stuff grew. But as it sits right now, I would recommend the game. I think it is worth the value that it sits at as it is right now. I do want to see some more cleanup in the UI. You know, if people are able to contribute to translations, absolutely get out there, support the developer. But I am going to keep it in that solid tier for the time being, because I do think it is one of those games that I'm going to enjoy playing for a while, and then it's probably going to get lost in my collection over time. It's not to say it's not a good game. That's not to say you're not going to get a lot of hours of fantastic playtime out of it, but I just don't think it's going to stand the test of time, at least as it is right now. And so that's what I have to say on The Last Hex. Once again, I think it's a good game. I think it's a fun game. And that's where I'm going to leave it. This is ultimately a positive review. I do hate that, you know, Slay the Spire was so genre defining that we're still sitting here talking about it in comparison to every other roguelike deck building game that comes along. I'm going to end the conversation there, though, and hopefully as time goes by, this genre will get wide enough that we'll stop defining it by one game. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Regardless, let me know your feedback any way you care to do it. Likes, dislikes, comments, at Runt9 Plays on Twitter, all great ways to get in contact with me. In addition, The Last Hex is a fairly common stream game over at twitch.tv/Runt9Plays. I do stream Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. So feel free to stop by and maybe get a chance to chat with the developer. They like to stop by and hang out when we're playing the game sometimes. That's going to do it for now. Until the next review, I'm Runt9, and I will see you later.